Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do another entry here based on one of your newer suggestions. Real quick though, thank you everyone for your patience this past week as I was on a little mini vacation. If you haven't had a chance, so I did two live videos while I was out there in Las Vegas. One of them was just a very quick video once again at the Bugsy Siegel Memorial. I didn't really have a chance, unfortunately, to do more on it because it started to rain. It rained several days, actually, in Las Vegas, if you can believe that. I mean, how rare is that to happen? And then the other one I did was another Ghosts and Spirits live video, but it had me and then also Randolin, or Randy, there as well. So I called it the Ghost Information video, and this is two of us, especially Randy, sharing lots of great info on ghosts and spirits and other interesting stuff. We took a lot of questions too from that video. I'll include the link below if you haven't had a chance to check it out, but it's really neat, so I highly recommend it. But going back to your suggestions, this one I almost did not talk about only because there wasn't much info associated with it. Maybe I was going to save it for one of the mixtape videos, but the reason why I decided to talk about it here is because there's an interesting twist to it. This is one of the first times that I've run into a cryptid that is almost like a fable, like it's tied to one of those stories where there's a good moral lesson associated with it. You know how Aesop's fables are infamous for that. Such is the case here. I don't recall any other cryptid being involved in something like that, so that's why I wanted to share it with you here. It has to do with this. You're looking at it now. It is a very fascinating design, very rarely seen. There's a lot of things pointing to it as far as it being one of the rarest cryptids of all, but it's known as the Kukuweaq. I hope I'm saying that correctly. That's how you see it spelled on the title, but the Kukuweaq. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all the fascinating info associated with this, in this case, this fabled or moral lesson-driven cryptid. So it has to do with this, and I'll talk about that moral lesson side here in a minute. First, the descriptions. So the Kukuweaq is a polar bear with variance in sizes. On some of the information I was looking, it's either like a regular sized polar bear, which are already large as is. I mean, it's definitely not something that you want to mess around with whenever you're encountering them. Or it could be a much larger sized polar bear. In this case, the size of a small iceberg. So those are huge just on their own. So imagine something like that wandering the areas there, in this case of Alaska, and in other cases regions of Canada. It all points to the colder regions, especially the ones that have a large amount of ice, perfect for polar bears. That's where you have a chance of running into this cryptid. But for all intents and purposes, yes, it's just a much larger sized polar bear, except for two things. Number one, and you see the pictures, the most fascinating thing are its legs. For whatever reason, it has, in this case, 10 appendages rather than, in this case, your average 4. In this case, like 2 legs, 2 feet, or whatever you could call them as far as the polar bear designations. No, in this case, there's 5 on each side. 5 on the right, 5 on the left, total of 10 appendages, and it uses it all to its advantage. So already, it's a much larger polar bear. That's one thing. That allows it to hunt for prey that is much larger than some of the other prey that normal polar bears go after. So in this case, this thing will actually go after larger whales, those that maybe surface on the ice or somewhere near its terrain. I'm picturing in this case like killer whales, for example, and in others those being boar whales and then gray-sized whales. So interesting stuff when it comes to its prey. It definitely uses its size to that advantage. Those legs too also come into another aspect. In this case, it can use those legs to swim very large distances, which kind of makes sense because if you've ever seen a polar bear footage of it, in this case swimming, it swims almost like a dog would. It uses all of its legs, kind of like paddling at the same time. Here you have, though, 5 times as much, in this case, of appendages to work with. So you would have something that can swim longer and then also swim faster, which makes sense considering the larger prey that it has to go after. And it can do so and stay submerged because of its large size. Maybe it can hold a larger amount of breath, in this case in its lungs, for 3 to 4 hours. So that's also pretty fascinating. So here you have something that is almost a perfect perfect weapon just geared for the icelands of Alaska or other areas there in Canada. Nothing is pretty much safe from it. It's probably the apex predator there within those locations. There's even information tied to this. Any creature that, let's say, happens to be chased by this Kukuweaq, in this case, those unfortunate creatures, if they thought that they're safe, let's say, behind some kind of large chunk of ice, they are wrong. It can use, again, its size to be able to break those large chunks of ice. I can totally imagine that too. Imagine using its weight, using its legs. It'll just ram into it or jump up and down, kind of like you see, like almost like a stamping motion as it hurls itself up and then down into the ice. It can use everything it has, especially its weight, to break through wherever its prey is hiding under. And then that's it. Too little, too late. This prey is now its food. Same thing on the opposite end. Well, let's say when it's submerged and it sees prey on top of the ice itself, it'll use its legs to swim at a great distance, to swim very strongly, and then basically break through the ice right there, and then it'll catch that prey. So, and it also goes after more traditional prey, the ones that polar bears usually eat. In this case, seals, other type of fish, smaller ones too. It definitely is within its realm as well. So at least those are all the physical characteristics of this Kukuweaq. Now, how all of this pertains to, let's say, the fabled size, the fabled stories, has to do with this. Who knows when this story started? Presumably it was way back when. One of those stories that has just passed through so many generations. It's just almost like folklore right now. It's tied to myths. It's tied to some kind of moral lesson. It has to do with this. So the way the story goes, there were these two people that live within a village. What the village was, I don't know. Like, it's just a nameless village. Where the village was located, who knows? It's presumably, again, within the cold regions there of whatever it was there in Alaska or Canada. Maybe when it wasn't, obviously those names were for whatever those regions were named previously. But within that village, these two men both had families to feed. It seemed like, though, one of them, he was someone that caught a walrus, and all he did, though, was take it to his home and kept all of the feast for himself. I don't know, though, if he necessarily had a family. Actually, it seemed like it was just him only, but it goes to show his greed. Here he had a very large prey, in this case a walrus, lots of meat on it, and something that could be shared with others in that hungry town, but he decided not to. He kept it all to himself, and then that way he could use the feast from that walrus for who knows how long thereafter. Well, his neighbor was someone who was also hunting, but he was a little less successful. And he, in turn, though, had a family that he had to feed. It almost seemed like he wanted to ask that neighbor who killed the walrus if he could have some of the food, but either way, though, he got the impression that that's not going to happen. So there he was out there again, trying to, in this case, find some prey, and he inadvertently went into the Kukuweaq's den. So wherever this home was of this cryptid, this guy either purposely or inadvertently wandered into it. No sooner did so, though, than he awakened this giant beast, and the chase was on. So here he was, in this case, fighting for his life, trying to get away as quick as possible from this very, very dangerous cryptid. At one point, though, he was able to stab it in the eye. So it shows, I guess, how resourceful he was. Maybe it was just by accident. Who knows? But he was able to do so. And then after a little bit of a chase later on, he was able to corner it into one location there. I think it was either near the den itself or somewhere surrounding it. Either way, though, he was able to corner it. And once that happened, then he was gonna he did like the final blow. He killed it, and then that was it. But he didn't necessarily keep everything to himself. In this case, this meat. Again, this was a creature that had a huge size. In this case, the size of an iceberg. He took that creature's carcass, he took it back to the village, and instead of just sharing it with his family, he shared it with everyone there, all the entire village, everyone who was starving, everyone who was hungry. And the way the legend goes, or this fable goes, the entire village recognized this man then as a very, very important person, and they revered him for it, while the neighbor, the one who killed a walrus and kept all the meat to himself, was shamed thereafter. So either he got a message that said, that he's no longer someone that's necessarily welcome in the village, or he realized it himself and he felt humiliation internally from it. Either way, though, the lesson was that the other guy was the one who got good points essentially for doing the right thing. So all of this is tied to that cryptid, in this case the Kukuweaq. All he did was just basically live there in that den and then inadvertently run into this villager, and then he got killed from it. But at least that's his own tie to the fable itself. But what do you guys think as far as the moral lesson associated with it? Kind of a bad run for this Kukuweaq, because he had to essentially be killed in order for this fable to play out for so many generations. But at least it's interesting to note that it's one of the few, if only, cryptids that's involved in such types of stories. I can't recall of any other one. So if anybody knows another one that stands out, then please post it in the comments below. But otherwise, what do you guys think about the cryptid itself? Do you think it's still roaming out there in Alaska, somewhere in Canada, other frozen regions? Anybody have any more info that I might have missed on it too? That'd be really, really good to share. My own thoughts on this creature is this. Obviously, it's very, very safe to stay away from polar bears when you're out there. So what I'm thinking is people may have, in this case, whenever they see a polar bear somewhere in the far distance, like they might have obviously run as quickly as possible away to try to stay away from this creature, to keep as far distance as they can. But in the far distance, it created some kind of illusion. So maybe there were some circumstances where so far away they were able to think and misinterpret the size, or misinterpret when this thing is running. Probably started to chase after them. How many appendages it has, who knows? A lot of that stuff too can be just false recollections. But who knows? As far as the tiny parts, there's always that small percentage where stuff cannot be explained away. So it's that stuff that makes me believe that yes, there could be something out there, in this case in the form of a Kukuweaq. So wherever it is, I hope it stays there. I'm not going to definitely go hunting for anything like that soon, and I wouldn't recommend it for anyone else here too, considering how dangerous this creature is. So all right, everybody, thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.